All right, guys, another week, another round of GoGaming news. However, this week has been very slow, in my opinion, when it comes to news related to gaming. So instead, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do GoGaming speculation. Let's call it that. We'll just call it speculation. And this is mostly based around Magic the Gathering. Now, over the past week, a new mechanic has been spoiled, leaked, whatever. I guess spoiled would be if it was official. It hasn't been guaranteed as official, so I guess this is leaked. A new mechanic has been leaked over the past week on Reddit and Twitter. And this mechanic is very relative to where we are right now. Currently, we're on the plane of Zendikar. And the mechanic is a new type of mana, I suppose, or kind of a new type of mana. It's the traditional gray color that the colorless mana has, but it's diamond shaped. On the screen, I'll have a picture of the land that produces this mana. This land is called Wastes. Now, it's important that it's being leaked here while we're on Zendikar, the land-based set. It makes it seem even more like it's a real thing. But 3 cards have been leaked with this diamond symbol. A lot of people are saying that it's a bismuth. I'm just going to call it diamond mana because it makes the most sense to me. I look at it, I say, hey, that's a new diamond. That's a new mana symbol. It's a diamond symbol. Must be diamond mana. But like I said, 3 cards have been spoiled. The first is Waste. It is a very important card all by itself because there's 3 words on this that are very important. First off, the name is Waste. It's a full art land, fitting the theme of Zendikar, where you're more likely to see full arts than any other place because land matters. And then the other 2 words that are important on it are basic land. Now, typically, whenever you have a basic land card, it's going to be one of 5 types: plains, island, swamp, mountain, forest. And then after basic land, which is the type of card that it is, it will have a subtype, and then it'll match. Plains will say basic land, plains. Island will say basic land, island, and so on. That's what's important about this card. If you notice, it says Waste at the top. It says basic land, but then there's no subtype. There's no second type. It doesn't say the word waste after it. Now, this card by itself is all important because forever, for ages, there's been the theory about there being a 6th land known as Barry's Land. Barry's Land would produce a colorless mana. Plains typically produces white mana. Islands produce blue mana, and so on and so forth. But there was the theory of there being a 6th land named Barry's Land, which was a basic land that produced colorless mana. The whole issue with this was that there's a mechanic called Domain. Sorry, mind blanked out on me. There's a mechanic called Domain, and recently it was made to work with Converge, or Converge was made to work with Domain. But domain spells typically get powerful or more powerful based on the different types of basic lands that you have. So, for example, if you had control of 1 plains on the battlefield and 1 island on the battlefield, your domain was now 2. All domain spells would be at the power of 2. If you had all 5 of the basic lands, which is the most basic lands you could have had at the time, domain would be at the power of 5. And Converge worked the same way as well. Now that we're here on Zendikar, we're seeing Converge spells again, and they work the same way. However, it's based on the different colors of mana spent to play that card. So if a card costs 3 in the blue, then at most that Converge could be power of 4. But as I was saying, we have Waste now, which is A, colorless, and B, has no subtype. So it's not affecting Domain and Converge, which was one of the major problems that the developers had. It would basically give all domain spells step up if a new basic land had a subtype. Okay, so that's the first card that has been spoiled with this new diamond mana. And I'm calling it diamond mana. I don't care what anyone says. And unless the new name has a much better and easier to say name for it, I'm calling it diamond mana. The second spell is Kozilek, the Great Distortion. For those of you not aware, we're here on Zendikar where there's adventure and treasures and everything, but they worshipped 3 gods, Kosi, Emma, and Ula. The 3 gods were named very similar to the 3 Eldrazi, the 3 main Eldrazi, Kozilek, Emrakul, and Ulamog. Now, Kozilek, the Great Distortion, costs 8 and 2 diamond mana. He's a legendary creature, obviously. He's an Eldrazi. And he has, when you cast Kozilek, the Great Distortion, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. He also has Menace, which means he can't be blocked by less than 2 creatures. And he has discard a card with converted mana cost X, counter target spell with converted mana cost X. He's a 12/12, and he is a mythic rare. Nothing too special about that. This is what we've seen from typical Eldrazi. They're here to mess things up. They're here to mess things up, just so you know. And the third card that was spoiled is Mirror Pool. Mirror Pool is a land, not a basic land. It's a non-basic land, I suppose, if that was obvious. Mirror Pool enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add 1 diamond mana to your mana pool. You can also pay 2 and 1 diamond mana, as well as tap and sacrifice Mirror Pool to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. And you may choose new targets for the copy. Or you can pay 4 and 1 diamond mana, as well as tap and sacrifice Mirror Pool to put a token on the battlefield as a copy of target creature you control. Now, there's a couple theories on how diamond mana works. Again, it's not official, so people are just speculating at how diamond mana would work. One theory is that diamond mana is just a new way to show that a card or an ability or a spell has a colorless mana cost. However, looking at Kozilek, the Great Distortion, it's kind of confusing that it has the diamond mana, which, according to this theory, just symbolizes that it's colorless, as well as the 8 beside it. Again, it costs 10 mana, 2 of which have to be diamond mana. Why would they have both of those there? That's more confusing than the difference between colorless and generic in my mind. And I've been playing the game for, 6 or 7 years now. My original theory on how waste works is it's an overlay, much like the morph overlays from Khans of Tarkir block. It's there just for a visual. It's not actually a mechanic with it. I'm sorry. It's not actually a card that you'll put inside of your deck, but there will be cards that turn lands or basic lands into wastes. That way, those lands, once wasted, I suppose, will produce this diamond mana instead of their normal colors of mana. For example, there might be a card that wastes a forest, and that forest is no longer a normal forest. It instead is a waste. It doesn't produce the green mana. It instead only produces diamond mana. Again, that's my original thought on how it works, just looking at the 3 cards. But then I thought that's very parasitic, and though it works flavor-wise with the idea that the Eldrazi are destroying the land and making it so it doesn't produce its typical mana anymore, that's not very gameplay. It's not based around players being able to play with each other. It's instead making decks harder to use, even with all the mana fixing that's currently in standard. So instead I thought, okay, how could this work? What would be the opposite of parasitic? How would it be a very symbiotic mechanic if this is real? Let's take a look at all the mechanics from both Zendikar blocks so far. All the mechanics fall to one of the 2 sides of this huge battle that's taking place on Zendikar. They're either of the Zendikari, such as landfall, not only the people, but the land itself trying to save itself, like landfall. Landfall is a strictly Zendikari mechanic. The Eldrazi don't care about landfall. Or they go to the Eldrazi side, and they're trying to help the Eldrazi destroy this world, such as Annihilator from the first block, or Devoid from this block. And I want you to keep Devoid in mind, because one of the major things from both blocks was that there's a colorless flavor in this block. Colorless matters in both blocks. As well as the story involving Ugin, a colorless dragon planeswalker who uses Ghostfire, a colorless spell that was relative in the first block, but costs red. Originally, they didn't want to reprint Ghostfire in this block because all the colorless spells are on the Eldrazi side. Everything that cares about colorless, Eldrazi side. And it doesn't make sense for Ugin, another planeswalker who's trying to save this world, having a spell that's focused on him, but he's not on the Eldrazi side. It makes for a weird comparison if Ghostfire was the only colorless spell. If Ghostfire was the only devoid spell. Devoid means that it's colorless, even though you have to pay a certain color in the mana cost to play it. My current theory is that Waste produces this diamond mana. Now, diamond mana is colorless. If you want to use it for just anything, it's colorless. However, it also fits the color cost in devoid spells. Now, this might be a little confusing to think of at first, but I'll include an image, a mock-up image of how the land works in my head on the screen so that you can see it as well as use a devoid creature that currently exists to explain it. Let's take a look at Dominator Drone. Dominator Drone came out in the first set of Battle for Zendikar. Dominator Drone is a devoid Eldrazi creature. It costs 3 mana, one of which must be black. However, it's colorless because of devoid. It has no color. So using my theory, you would be able to tap Waste to pay for that black mana. Even though you don't have a swamp, even though you don't have any land that produces black mana, you can use the diamond mana to pay for that devoid creature's colorless cost. It makes sense because if this card is aligned with the Eldrazi, that means it favors the Eldrazi as opposed to favoring the Zendikari. Again, that's just my theory. That's just after hours of wearing a tinfoil hat and looking at these 3 cards. That's what came up in my mind. I would be very surprised if that's what happens because it's kind of loose in my mind. I haven't figured everything out around it. Figured out why the 2 diamonds would still be in Kozilek's cost. Another theory altogether that makes people wonder if this is even real is why the second set? Why would they do this in the second set of this land-based block? But why would they wait 2 sets later to do something that they could have done 2 sets earlier when they made so many changes to how everything works already? It's just weird. It's just very weird timing. That's why I feel like it has to be just for this block and not an evergreen change to the game. I don't know, but that's just me speculating. That's just me theorizing. It's just me theorizing, guys. Next week we'll be back with more gaming news, more traditional GoGaming news, and then we're gonna slow it down a little bit for the holidays. Everything on the channel is gonna slow down just a tad, but we'll still have videos pumping out on the regular. All right, check you guys next week.